On June 15, 1943, soaring at an altitude of 25,000 feet above the tumultuous English Channel, the renowned German ace pilot Klaus Brenner intently peered through the cockpit canopy of his Messerschmitt. His gaze fixed upon an approaching American aerial formation, comprising 8 P-47s, those cumbersome, heavy-set, flying milk bottles that the Luftwaffe had, for many months, effortlessly swatted from the European skies. A confident smirk creased Brenner's lips. The Thunderbolts ascended laboriously, much like overloaded freight trains, their maximum climb rate barely reaching 1,500 feet per minute. In stark contrast, his agile Messerschmitt 109 could execute intricate aerial ballets around them in any vertical engagement. This encounter, he mused, would undoubtedly be another effortless triumph. Yet, as Brenner initiated his characteristic attack dive, an unforeseen development unfolded. The lead P-47, instead of attempting to evade or turn away, pitched upwards into an astoundingly aggressive climb. This maneuver defied every piece of intelligence the Luftwaffe possessed concerning American fighter capabilities. The massive aircraft clawed skyward with a ferocity previously unseen, ascending at nearly 2,000 feet per minute, its engine emitting a piercing shriek at full power, pursuing Brenner into what he considered his own exclusive domain. Confined within the cramped cockpit of his Messerschmitt, the German pilot experienced his first unsettling realization of fear, as that stupid American propeller, a 13-foot marvel of revolutionary paddle blade engineering, transformed what was once considered the sky's biggest joke into its most terrifying and formidable predator. The comprehensive morning reports emanating from the European theater painted a somber assessment, an unvarnished reality that no amount of optimistic rhetoric from the Pentagon could possibly disguise. By September 1943, the P-47 Thunderbolt had accumulated such a dismal renown that seasoned American pilots were actively requesting transfers to any other aircraft with wings. The pejorative moniker given to the aircraft by Luftwaffe pilots, Jug, a reference to its distinctive milk bottle silhouette, had permeated enemy lines and now echoed through Allied briefing rooms, laden with poignant sarcasm and bitter irony. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. At right field, Colonel James Johnson perused the latest combat assessment reports, his coffee growing cold as the stark numbers presented their unflinching narrative. The P-47's inherent climb rate of 1,500 feet per minute rendered it vulnerable prey against the Messerschmitt 109s, which could effortlessly ascend at over 3,000 feet per minute. During the intense dogfights unfolding over occupied France, German pilots had perfected a straightforward yet highly effective tactic. Simply climb above the Thunderbolts and then leisurely dispatch them at their convenience. The massive American fighter, weighing in at over 7 tons when fully loaded, proved utterly incapable of following enemy aircraft into the crucial vertical realm where modern air combat was decisively won or lost. Meanwhile, Frank Caldwell scrutinized these identical reports from his confined workspace at Hamilton Standard Division. However, where military commanders perceived outright failure, the veteran engineer discerned a fundamental problem of physics. The formidable Pratt & Whitney R-800 double wasp engine, nestled within the P-47's nose, generated an impressive 2,300 horsepower, a prodigious output exceeding that of any other fighter engine globally. Yet, inexplicably, all that immense energy was being squandered. The core issue did not lie with the engine or the airframe. Rather, the bottleneck was the narrow-bladed propeller, which proved incapable of efficiently absorbing and translating that massive torque into effective forward propulsive force. Traditional propeller design had scarcely evolved since the conclusion of the Great War. Engineers had conventionally constructed them with thin, razor-thin foils that cut efficiently through the air primarily at cruising speeds. However, efficiency at cruise became utterly irrelevant when combat scenarios demanded the absolute maximum power. The P-47 standard propeller blades, measuring just 11 feet in diameter, simply could not handle the full output of the R-2800 engine without a significant loss of effectiveness. At full throttle, the blade tips approached supersonic speeds, a detrimental phenomenon that generated shock waves, which in turn destroyed lift and effectively transformed the propeller into an expensive and crippling air brake. The radical solution that crystallized in Caldwell's mind constituted a direct violation of every established principle of conventional propeller design. Instead of thin blades optimized solely for cruise efficiency, he envisioned broad, paddle-shaped blades. These unorthodox blades were designed to grab massive quantities of air and hurl it backward with sheer brute force. The entire concept bore a closer resemblance to a boat propeller than an aircraft prop. Thick, wide, and almost unapologetically utilitarian blades that unequivocally prioritized raw, unrefined power and thrust over elegant aerodynamic efficiency. His colleagues at Hamilton Standard listened to Caldwell's audacious proposal with considerable, albeit polite, skepticism. Tom Richards, the division's senior aerodynamicist, promptly highlighted the numerous and obvious practical problems: increased overall weight, significantly higher drag at typical cruise speeds, and a manufacturing complexity that would render mass production nearly impossible. Furthermore, the military had already invested millions of dollars into existing propeller tooling. Retooling entire production lines for an unproven design would incur a prohibitive expense and lead to protracted delays in crucial aircraft deliveries for many months. Nevertheless, Caldwell had meticulously run the rigorous computations. His calculations demonstrated that a 13-foot diameter propeller, equipped with these paddle blades, could indeed fully absorb the entire 2,300 horsepower output of the R-2800 engine. The resulting increase in thrust, he argued, would more than counteract the additional drag, and the larger diameter would effectively reduce tip speeds, thereby alleviating the debilitating shockwave problem that plagued existing designs. More importantly, this innovative new propeller would rejuvenate the P-47's abysmal climb rate, transforming it into something that could not only compete, but potentially become a formidable contender against the agile German fighters. The pervasive doubt was not confined solely to Hamilton Standard's engineering staff. At Curtiss Electric, Hamilton's fierce rival in military propeller contracts, senior engineer Robert Hayes categorically rejected the paddle blade concept. He dismissed it as a desperate and ultimately futile endeavor to fix an aircraft he considered unfixable. Curtiss, for its part, had its own solution under development, an evolutionary refinement of their existing narrow blade design, featuring improved pitch control mechanisms and a slightly larger diameter. Their established methodology was inherently conservative, thoroughly proven, and crucially could be manufactured utilizing existing tooling without significant disruption. The U.S. Army Air Forces thus found itself in a perplexing predicament, caught between two divergent ideologies. The conservative approach promised modest enhancements with minimal associated risk and cost. Conversely, the radical approach held the promise of revolutionary performance gains, yet it simultaneously carried enormous technical and financial perils. Colonel Johnson, now tasked with the critical responsibility of evaluating both proposals, faced a profound decision that would undoubtedly affect the lives and fortunes of thousands of American pilots preparing for combat over the skies of Europe. Simultaneously, across the Atlantic, Luftwaffe intelligence officers were tracking American aircraft development with characteristic German thoroughness and meticulous precision. Major Wilhelm, stationed at a Luftwaffe technical evaluation center in occupied France, had personally scrutinized several captured P-47s. His subsequent reports to Berlin were largely dismissive and unflattering. The American fighter, he concluded, was essentially a crude, brute force design that relied heavily on thick armor and powerful engines merely to compensate for inherent deficiencies in its aerodynamics. German pilots, he confidently asserted, could continue to exploit its sluggish climb rate and poor maneuverability indefinitely. Major Wilhelm's unwavering confidence permeated the entire command structure of the Luftwaffe. While acknowledging America's prowess in rapidly manufacturing aircraft in immense quantities, German strategists perceived a distinct inability on the part of the Allies to emulate Germany's advanced engineering sophistication. The P-47 Thunderbolt, in their estimation, epitomized the inherent flaws in American aircraft design. It was perceived as oversized, ponderous, crudely constructed, and notably inefficient. German aviators frequently quipped that engaging a Thunderbolt in aerial combat was akin to hunting a flying refrigerator, an easy target to acquire, and assured to plummet once critically struck. The pivotal September test flights at Wright Field were poised to definitively determine the foundational design philosophy that would underpin American fighter aircraft for the critical engagements looming on the horizon. Frank Caldwell's innovative paddle blade propeller had been affixed to a singular P-47D model for an initial crucial evaluation. The aircraft, as it rested on the flight line, presented an almost comically disproportionate appearance. Its colossal propeller blades seemed more suited to a heavy-lift cargo transport than to a nimble combat-ready fighter. Test pilot Captain Robert Anderson ascended into the cockpit. His directives clear: to push the aircraft to its absolute operational limits and meticulously document any shifts in performance. As Anderson meticulously taxied towards the designated runway, neither he nor the cadre of engineers observing intently from the control tower possessed the slightest inkling that they were on the cusp of witnessing the profound metamorphosis of what was widely considered aerial warfare's most significant disappointment into its most formidable and dreaded predator. The conventional wisdom that had meticulously guided fighter design for a span of 2 decades was about to be irrevocably shattered by a mere 13 feet of groundbreaking engineering, a development destined to fundamentally rewrite the established rules of air combat across the European theater. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The inaugural test flight, conducted on October 12th, concluded abruptly after a mere 14 minutes, as Captain Anderson guided the modified P-47 back to Wright Field delivering a profoundly unsettling report of severe vibrations. The immense paddle blades had generated intense harmonic oscillations that reverberated throughout the entire airframe, creating a palpable threat of the aircraft disintegrating at any throttle setting exceeding 70%. From the vantage point of the control tower, Frank Caldwell observed with concern as ground crews swarmed the aircraft, meticulously inspecting for any signs of stress fractures or loosened rivets. While the occurrence of propeller vibrations was not entirely unforeseen, a phenomenon that had plagued aviation since the pioneering efforts of the Wright brothers, the sheer intensity of this particular issue strongly indicated fundamental deficiencies within the blade's design. Caldwell's dedicated team embarked on an intensive 3-week period, laboring tirelessly to meticulously redesign the blade root attachment system and precisely recalibrate the propeller hub's balance. The initial blades had been fabricated utilizing conventional manufacturing techniques, which proved perfectly adequate for narrower blade configurations, but were utterly insufficient to withstand the immense dynamic forces generated by the expansive paddle design. Each individual blade boasted a mass nearly double that of conventional designs, consequently inducing rotational stresses that the standard hub assembly was simply incapable of handling. The ultimate engineering solution necessitated the creation of custom-forged blade shanks and a comprehensively redesigned hub assembly, which, while resolving the issue, regrettably added an additional 200 pounds to the aircraft's nose weight. The subsequent test flight, undertaken on November 5th, yielded results that, while different, proved to be equally disheartening. Although the pervasive vibration problem had been successfully rectified, the performance of the newly installed propeller fell considerably short of Caldwell's meticulous calculations. Rather than the anticipated climb rate enhancement to an impressive 2,900 feet per minute, Captain Anderson reported a meager 1,600 feet per minute, representing a disappointing improvement of only 100 feet per minute over the standard propeller configuration. The projected increase in top speed was similarly underwhelming, with the aircraft barely achieving 410 mph, a marginal gain compared to its baseline speed of 400 mph. Robert Hayes, a prominent figure at Curtiss Electric, received the discouraging test results with an expression of barely concealed satisfaction. His team's meticulously refined narrow blade design had successfully concluded its own preliminary testing just the previous week, yielding significantly more auspicious figures. The Curtiss propeller demonstrated an impressive climb rate of 1,750 feet per minute and adeptly maintained the aircraft's existing top speed, all without incurring the substantial weight penalty or the manufacturing complexities inherent in Caldwell's innovative paddle blade design. Hayes promptly forwarded his favorable results to Colonel Johnson, accompanied by a concise memo suggesting that Hamilton Standard's radical engineering approach had unequivocally proven itself to be an expensive and ultimately fruitless endeavor. However, Caldwell harbored a strong suspicion that the root of the problem did not lie with the fundamental paddle blade concept itself, but rather with the propeller's specific pitch settings and the optimization of its blade angle. The initial design parameters had been derived from theoretical calculations that inherently presumed ideal operational conditions. Real-world flight testing, however, revealed a significant divergence. The optimal blade angle required for superior climb performance differed considerably from the angle that produced maximum speed in level flight. The P-47's existing constant speed propeller system possessed the capability to automatically adjust pitch during flight, but its operational range of adjustment had been specifically calibrated for the characteristics of narrower blade designs. Working with an extraordinary dedication, often for 18-hour days, within Hamilton Standard's Advanced Engineering Lab, Caldwell's team successfully engineered and developed a novel, constant speed mechanism. This innovative system boasted an impressive pitch adjustment range that was precisely double that of any existing systems. While this modification necessitated extensive alterations to the propeller governor and its intricate hydraulic controls, its crucial benefit was enabling the paddle blades to operate at their optimal angles across the entirety of the flight envelope. The meticulously redesigned system possessed the versatility to seamlessly transition from a coarse pitch setting, ideal for high-speed cruising, to an exceptionally fine pitch, specifically designed for generating maximum static thrust during the critical phases of takeoff and climb. The myriad engineering challenges encountered extended far beyond the mere complexities of pitch control. The significantly increased surface area of the paddle blades inadvertently introduced substantial cooling problems for the engine. While the larger propeller disc effectively drew a greater volume of air through the engine cowling, the increased aerodynamic resistance meant that this air moved at a comparatively slower velocity. Consequently, engine temperatures ascended to dangerously high levels during prolonged full-power operations, posing a severe threat of irreparable damage to the R2800 cylinders. Caldwell's team was thus compelled to undertake a comprehensive redesign of the cowling's air intake system and to strategically incorporate additional cooling louvers to meticulously maintain appropriate engine temperatures. Lieutenant Colonel Johnson found himself under intensifying pressure from Pentagon officials, who were increasingly questioning the continued justification for investing in the P-47 program. Simultaneously, the P-51 Mustang was exhibiting exceptional promise in its early testing phases, consistently delivering performance metrics that convincingly surpassed both the standard P-47 and the proposed paddle blade modification. A faction of officials vehemently argued that valuable resources would be far more judiciously allocated towards accelerating the production of the P-51 rather than persisting in attempts to rectify the fundamental limitations inherent in the Thunderbolt. The third and ultimately decisive test flight, conducted on December 8th, finally and unequivocally showcased the paddle blade propeller's true transformative potential. Equipped with the newly integrated pitch control system and the meticulously redesigned cooling apparatus, Captain Anderson expertly maneuvered the modified P-47 through a demanding series of combat maneuvers that would have been utterly unattainable with the standard aircraft configuration. The aircraft ascended to an altitude of 20,000 feet in an impressive 10 minutes and 40 seconds, achieving a remarkable climb rate of 1,850 feet per minute, a performance figure that now closely rivaled that of leading German fighter aircraft. Even more significantly, the Thunderbolt demonstrated its ability to sustain this exceptional climb rate while carrying its full combat weight, a critical factor encompassing armor, ammunition, and a complete fuel load. The extensive testing also yielded equally promising results concerning the aircraft's velocity. At an altitude of 25,000 feet, the P-47, now equipped with its modifications, demonstrated a remarkable speed of 445 miles per hour during level flight. This represented a substantial increase of 45 mph compared to its original unmodified configuration. Importantly, this enhancement in speed was not attributed to a reduction in aerodynamic drag, but rather to the propeller's significantly improved efficiency in converting the engine's prodigious power into forward propulsion. In the rarefied atmosphere of high altitudes, where air density is considerably diminished, the broader paddle blades exhibited a distinctly superior grip on the thin air, thereby conferring a decisive advantage over conventional, narrower propeller designs. However, the most groundbreaking revelation emerged during the rigorous dive recovery evaluations. The P-47 had historically borne a reputation for its inherent reluctance to safely exit high-speed descents. Its standard slender-bladed propeller simply lacked the requisite thrust to counteract the aircraft's immense kinetic energy and substantial mass. Through his diligent work, Anderson discovered that the innovative paddle blade propeller, when set to a fine pitch, generated sufficient reverse thrust. This crucial capability enabled the aircraft to effectively decelerate and subsequently recover from dives that, under the original configuration, would almost certainly have proven catastrophic. Meanwhile, German intelligence reports compiled in late December characterized the revamped P-47 as an intriguing, yet ultimately inconsequential development. Analysts within the Luftwaffe observed that American forces were indeed experimenting with larger propellers on their fighter aircraft, but they summarily dismissed these alterations as desperate attempts to bolster an already antiquated design. Major Wilhelm's official assessment concluded with certainty that, notwithstanding any propeller enhancements, the P-47 remained inherently inferior to German fighter aircraft in virtually every operational metric, with the sole exceptions of its straight-line speed and its established diving prowess. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The compelling December test outcomes ultimately persuaded Colonel Johnson to sanction a limited production run of the paddle blade propeller, specifically for comprehensive operational testing. Consequently, Hamilton Standard was awarded a contract for 50 propeller units, earmarked for installation on P-47D-22 aircraft slated for deployment to the European theater in early 1944. This order represented a considerable, calculated risk. Should the paddle blade design falter in the crucible of actual combat, American aviators would undoubtedly bear the ultimate cost, sacrificing their lives. Caldwell's dedicated team toiled tirelessly throughout the Christmas holidays, meticulously preparing the necessary production tooling and rigorously training manufacturing personnel on the novel assembly protocols. Each individual paddle blade propeller demanded approximately 40% more manufacturing time than its conventional counterparts and incurred nearly double the production cost. While the financial exposure was undoubtedly immense, the prospective rewards, specifically the transformation of the P-47 into a truly formidable and competitive fighter aircraft, unequivocally justified the substantial investment. As the year 1944 dawned, the inaugural production paddle blade propellers departed Hamilton Standard's facilities, en route to various modification centers where they would be fitted onto Thunderbolts destined for the intense aerial battles over Europe. Neither the American engineers, who meticulously crafted these revolutionary components, nor the German pilots who would soon confront them in combat, could possibly fathom the profound extent to which these 13 feet of cutting-edge engineering would irrevocably alter the delicate balance of power in the contested skies above occupied Europe. The initial contingent of paddle blade-equipped P-47s touched down at RAF Boxted on March 15, 1944, immediately igniting a significant debate among the seasoned pilots of the 356th Fighter Group. Captain Mike Gladys, a Polish émigré, boasting a commendable record of 12 confirmed aerial victories, scrutinized the conspicuously massive propeller blades with unconcealed skepticism. To his experienced eye, the blades appeared crudely fashioned and disproportionately large when juxtaposed against the elegant, slender propellers he was accustomed to operating. Several pilots derisively dubbed the modified aircraft barn door specials and formally requested authorization to continue flying their standard Thunderbolts until the efficacy of the new design had been definitively proven in combat. Group Commander Colonel Harold Ralph found himself in an exceptionally precarious predicament. His pilots had endured and survived months of brutal air-to-air engagements, relying heavily on their exceptional skill and an intimate understanding of their aircraft's specific capabilities and inherent limitations. Coercing them to operate unfamiliar equipment carried the distinct risk of fatal consequences. However, the operational directives emanating from 8th Air Force Headquarters were unequivocally explicit. The modified P-47s were to undergo evaluation under authentic combat conditions with the utmost urgency. The ultimate triumph or failure of Caldwell's innovative paddle blade design would not be determined in controlled test flights, but rather in perilous, life-or-death confrontations against highly experienced Luftwaffe pilots high above occupied Europe. The inaugural combat sortie for the newly modified Thunderbolts occurred on March 22nd during a crucial bomber escort mission bound for Berlin. Gladys spearheaded a flight of 4 paddle blade P-47s assigned to provide high cover for an advancing formation of B-17 flying fortresses as they approached the formidable German capital. At a cruising altitude of 30,000 feet, positioned well above the bomber stream, Gladys's keen eyes detected a formation of Messerschmitt 109s executing a classic bounce attack, diving precipitously from 35,000 feet. Under typical circumstances, the P-47s would have been compelled to disengage by diving away from the German fighters, leveraging their inherent superior speed in a descent to evade the Messerschmitt's distinct advantage in climbing performance. Instead, Gladys, with audacious resolve, directed his flight into an exceptionally steep climb, aiming directly to intercept the diving Messerschmitts. The paddle blade propellers, demonstrating unprecedented authority, clawed vigorously through the thin, high-altitude air, sustaining an impressive climb rate exceeding 1,700 feet per minute, even at 30,000 feet, an altitude where standard propellers would have struggled immensely to achieve even half of that performance. The German pilots, fully anticipating the American fighters to dive away in evasion, were utterly astonished to find themselves confronted by P-47s aggressively climbing directly into their attack trajectory, possessing ample energy to engage in sustained turning combat at such lofty altitudes. The ensuing engagement, though lasting less than 3 minutes, irrevocably shattered long-held German assumptions regarding American fighter capabilities, presumptions that had remained largely unchallenged for over 2 years of relentless combat. Gladys's wingman, Lieutenant Robert Johnson, remarkably managed to maintain pursuit of a Messerschmitt 109 through a demanding series of climbing turns, a maneuver that would have been utterly unfeasible with the standard propeller configuration. The Messerschmitt pilot, Major Hans Dormann, subsequently reported to Luftwaffe intelligence that the American fighter had exhibited climb performance entirely commensurate with German aircraft, a claim that was initially dismissed as either a consequence of combat stress or a simple pilot error. News of this extraordinary engagement rapidly permeated through the various Luftwaffe fighter units strategically stationed across Western Europe. German pilots had meticulously honed their tactical approaches based on the absolute certainty that they could consistently outclimb any American fighter, thereby enabling them to dictate the terms of engagement from a position of superior altitude. The unsettling possibility that P-47s could now effectively compete in vertical maneuvering threatened to invalidate years of accumulated combat experience and deeply ingrained tactical doctrine. Consequently, several group commanders urgently requested immediate verification of these reported American fighter modifications from their intelligence sources. According to detailed intelligence reports, Major Wilhelm's Specialized Technical Intelligence Unit achieved a significant capture on April 2nd. This occurred when Lieutenant Charles Morrison was compelled to execute a crash landing near Calais, his paddle blade-equipped P-47 aircraft having sustained considerable damage from anti-aircraft fire during a ground attack sortie. Although Lieutenant Morrison commendably succeeded in disabling the majority of his aircraft's sensitive instrumentation before his capture, the innovative propeller itself remained remarkably intact, presenting a unique opportunity for German scrutiny. Wilhelm's preliminary assessment characterized the paddle blades as extraordinarily large, and he initially posited that such a modification would likely generate more operational complications than it resolved. However, the subsequent, exhaustive technical analysis swiftly unveiled the profound engineering sophistication embedded within Caldwell's design. German aeronautical engineers were astonished to discover that these paddle blades incorporated advanced metallurgical compositions and employed precision manufacturing methodologies that far surpassed any capabilities currently existing within Luftwaffe production lines. Furthermore, the constant speed propeller mechanism showcased groundbreaking innovations in hydraulic control systems, a technological frontier that German designers had yet to reach. Most unsettling was the stark realization that American engineers had definitively resolved complex propeller efficiency challenges that their German counterparts had previously deemed insurmountable with contemporary technology. The deluge of combat reports emanating from April and early May progressively painted an increasingly dire operational landscape for the Luftwaffe across Western Europe. American P-47s, now significantly enhanced, were aggressively engaging German fighter aircraft in climbing maneuvers and consistently emerging triumphant. The 356th Fighter Group, for instance, independently laid claim to the destruction of 21 German aircraft during April alone, with a substantial portion of these victories originating from aerial engagements that conventional P-47s would have been utterly incapable of surviving. We invite you to stay with us and watch the end of this video. Your like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. Please share in the comments where you are from and what you think about this fascinating video topic. German pilot fatalities began to escalate sharply as their long-held altitude superiority, which formed the very bedrock of Luftwaffe fighter tactics, commenced a rapid and irreversible erosion. The strategic ramifications of this shift extended far beyond the confines of individual aerial duels. German fighter controllers had historically positioned their interceptor aircraft to launch attacks on American bomber formations from superior altitudes. confident in the knowledge that the escorting P-47s lacked the necessary climb rate to effectively thwart these swift, high-to-low bounce attacks. Crucially, the advent of the paddle blade propellers empowered American fighters to maintain their assigned stations seamlessly at the bomber's operational altitude and to react with immediate and decisive force to German assaults from any vector. Luftwaffe bomber interception missions, which had previously enjoyed success primarily by exploiting an altitude advantage, now encountered immediate and formidable opposition from American escorts operating at their peak combat effectiveness. By the middle of May, virtually every frontline P-47 deployed in the European theater had been retrofitted with the advanced paddle blade propellers. The extensive modification program had successfully navigated and overcome its initial manufacturing hurdles, achieving a robust production rate of 200 propeller units per month. Hamilton Standard's primary manufacturing facility in Connecticut maintained continuous around-the-clock operations to satisfy the burgeoning military demand, with Frank Caldwell's dedicated engineering team collaborating closely alongside the production personnel to meticulously refine manufacturing processes and systematically eliminate any quality control deficiencies. The quantitative evidence demonstrating the paddle blade's profound impact became unequivocally clear by the close of the month. P-47 units that had been equipped with the innovative new propellers reported a remarkable 40% surge in air-to-air victory rates when juxtaposed with the performance of those same units utilizing standard propellers. Even more significantly, P-47 loss rates experienced a substantial 30% reduction, a direct consequence of pilots now possessing the critical ability to climb away from perilous combat situations rather than being solely dependent on sheer diving speed for evasion. Consequently, the Thunderbolt was no longer regarded as the Luftwaffe's preferred or vulnerable target. In late May, Colonel Johnson received official authorization to broaden the paddle blade modification program to encompass all P-47 variants currently in production. The undeniable and resounding success observed in the European theater had thoroughly convinced high-ranking Pentagon officials that Caldwell's unconventional, stupid propeller trick represented one of the most pivotal technological breakthroughs of the entire conflict. Directives were subsequently issued to modify existing P-47s operating in the Pacific Theater and to ensure that all newly manufactured aircraft were equipped with paddle blade propellers directly from the factory floor. German intelligence officers faced considerable difficulty in furnishing a coherent explanation for the sudden and dramatic improvement in American fighter performance to Luftwaffe commanders, who had long grown accustomed to maintaining an inherent tactical superiority over Allied fighter aircraft. Major Speck's updated intelligence dispatches reluctantly acknowledged that the Americans had indeed secured a substantial technological advantage. However, German aircraft designers were severely hampered by a critical lack of both manufacturing capacity and essential raw materials, making the development of comparable propeller enhancements an unfeasible endeavor. The Luftwaffe was thus compelled to confront the remainder of the conflict with the stark realization that their fighter forces could no longer assert dominance over American adversaries through superior climb performance and a decisive altitude advantage. The profound transformation in aerial combat dynamics was complete. Frank Caldwell's revolutionary paddle blade propeller had fundamentally transmuted the P-47 Thunderbolt from being a relatively easy target for the Luftwaffe into their most formidable and dangerous opponent, thereby completely rewriting the tactical balance of air combat over Europe merely months before the D-Day invasion would necessitate absolute Allied air superiority. D-Day morning, June 6, 1944, presented the ultimate and most critical test of Frank Caldwell's engineering revolution as nearly 400 paddle-blade-equipped P-47s roared across the English Channel at dawn. This colossal air armada, specifically tasked with securing unwavering Allied air superiority over the Normandy beaches, comprised more modified Thunderbolts than any preceding operation. Their distinctive broad propeller blades gleamed as they caught the first rays of light on what would undoubtedly prove to be the most protracted and consequential day in the annals of aviation history. Colonel Francis Gabreski, leading the 56th Fighter Group, executed a sweeping mission over Omaha Beach at precisely 6:30 hours. His formation of 16 P-47s ascended to an altitude of 25,000 feet, with an impressive authority and speed that would have been utterly unattainable just half a year prior. Below them, the largest seaborne invasion in human history was dynamically unfolding as countless Allied landing craft approached the heavily fortified French coastline. Conversely, above them, German fighters were conspicuously absent from the skies they had once dominated with absolute impunity. The Luftwaffe's faltering response to the invasion vividly underscored the devastating impact of the paddle-blade revolution on established German tactical doctrine. Oberst Adolf Galland, who commanded Luftflotte Reich's formidable fighter forces, had been unequivocally compelled to abandon the altitude advantage tactics that had served German pilots so effectively since the Battle of Britain. His fighter aircraft could no longer depend on outclimbing American escorts to launch their preferred high-altitude attacks on Allied bombers. Instead, German pilots found themselves forcibly drawn into low-altitude engagements, a combat environment where the P-47's inherent superior firepower and robust armor plating provided insurmountable and decisive advantages. Major Klaus Matuschia's Jagdgeschwader, a German fighter wing, received directives to engage Allied fighter bombers that were assaulting German positions in the vicinity of Caen. However, the overarching tactical circumstances had undergone a profound transformation since the novel paddle-blade propeller modifications began to manifest across the European theater. Matuschia's Focke-Wulf Fu-190s, which had previously possessed the distinct capability to ascend above American adversaries and thereby dictate the terms of aerial engagements, now discovered themselves either matched or even surpassed in their vertical climbing prowess by Thunderbolts. These American fighters were demonstrating an unprecedented ability to sustain their combat effectiveness irrespective of altitude. The initial significant aerial confrontation of that morning unfolded over the invasion beaches, where a formation of 24 Messerschmitt Bf 109s launched an attempt to target the Allied naval forces, providing crucial support for the ongoing landings. Captain Robert Johnson's flight, comprising 8 P-47s equipped with the advanced paddle-blade propellers, successfully intercepted the German squadron at an elevation of 18,000 feet. Remarkably, these aircraft achieved this altitude from sea level in just under 9 minutes, a formidable ascent rate that enabled them to reach the Messerschmitts before the German aviators could finalize their attack runs on the vulnerable vessels below. This particular engagement vividly underscored the extent to which the paddle blade propeller had fundamentally reshaped the dynamics of air combat. German pilots, who had meticulously honed their fighting strategies by consistently gaining superior altitude over their opponents, now found themselves utterly incapable of evading American fighters that could not only equal their climb rate, but also surpass their speed in level flight. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please write a comment below about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Lieutenant Hans Wick, participating in his 43rd combat mission, provided a striking report, observing that the American Thunderbolts ascended with the velocity of rockets and maintained relentless pursuit through intricate maneuvers that would have unequivocally dislodged P-47s outfitted with conventional propellers. By the midday hours, Luftwaffe flight controllers were registering American fighter operations at altitudes previously considered secure sanctuaries for German aircraft. P-47s were actively engaging German fighters at staggering heights of 30,000 feet, securing victories in dogfights predominantly through sophisticated energy management techniques. A notable departure from the more direct, brute force tactics that had characterized earlier Thunderbolt operations. The revolutionary paddle-blade propellers granted American pilots the tactical flexibility to exchange altitude for enhanced speed, and crucially, to swiftly regain that lost altitude, thereby sustaining a distinct tactical advantage throughout prolonged engagements. The quantifiable reality of D-Day's aerial operations graphically narrated the triumph of Caldwell's engineering ingenuity through compelling statistics. Allied air forces executed an astonishing total of over 14,000 sorties on June 6th, whereas the Luftwaffe could only muster fewer than 300, a ratio that eloquently conveyed not merely a numerical ascendancy, but more significantly, the profound tactical dominance that paddle-blade-equipped fighters had firmly established across the European firmament. German pilots who dared to engage Allied formations invariably found themselves skillfully outmaneuvered by American fighters that exhibited unparalleled effectiveness in climbing, diving, and turning, capabilities that rendered traditional Luftwaffe tactics entirely obsolete. General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland's evening briefing presented Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring with a devastating portrayal of German fighter impotence over the crucial invasion beaches. Galland's pilots had optimistically claimed the destruction of 17 Allied aircraft during the day's intense operations. However, actual German losses grievously exceeded 40 fighters. Such an unsustainable exchange rate portended the rapid and inevitable elimination of the Luftwaffe as a viable fighting force. The paddle-blade P-47s had unequivocally demonstrated their superior capability to decisively defeat German fighters in every conceivable type of engagement, ranging from close-quarters, low-altitude dogfights to high-altitude interceptions. The final aerial confrontations of the evening transpired as German night fighters endeavored to assault Allied naval forces under the protective shroud of darkness. The 8th Air Force had strategically outfitted several P-47 squadrons with experimental radar systems specifically for night interception missions. In these complex nocturnal operations, the paddle-blade propellers proved indispensable for maintaining precise station with radar-equipped aircraft during intricate maneuvers. The Thunderbolts' significantly enhanced climb performance uniquely empowered them to position themselves advantageously above German night fighters enabling them to initiate attacks with the very same altitude superiority that Luftwaffe pilots had once exclusively enjoyed. Frank Caldwell himself received the initial dispatches regarding the D-Day air operations at Hamilton Standard's Connecticut factory, a bustling hub where his dedicated team toiled tirelessly around the clock to satisfy the escalating military demands for paddle blade propellers. The resounding success achieved over Normandy unequivocally validated every aspect Caldwell had originally envisioned when he first put forth his groundbreaking, revolutionary design. What was once dismissively labeled the stupid propeller trick had in fact profoundly transformed American air power from a primarily defensive entity, barely capable of safeguarding Allied bombers, into an formidable offensive weapon system that possessed the undeniable capacity to dominate the skies over Europe. The broader ramifications stemming from the paddle blade's remarkable success extended far beyond the confines of individual aerial skirmishes. The uncontested Allied air superiority established over the invasion beaches afforded ground forces the crucial freedom to advance inland without the perpetual menace of German air attacks, a persistent threat that had characterized earlier amphibious operations. The Luftwaffe's demonstrated incapacity to effectively challenge Allied air operations meant that German ground forces would, for the remainder of the conflict, confront the grim reality of fighting without any meaningful air support, a critical strategic disadvantage that would ultimately prove decisive in the arduous campaign for Western Europe. German aircraft designers, meticulously examining captured paddle blade propellers in late June, arrived at profoundly sobering conclusions regarding American technological prowess. These propeller modifications conspicuously represented significant advancements in the fields of metallurgy, precision manufacturing techniques, and aerodynamic design, capabilities that German industry, with its existing resources, simply could not replicate. More unsettling still was the stark realization that the Americans had successfully resolved the fundamental engineering challenge of efficiently converting immense engine horsepower into effective propulsive thrust, a monumental breakthrough that promised to confer enduring advantages in any future aircraft designs. As the month of June concluded and Allied forces progressively consolidated their strategic positions in Normandy, the profound strategic impact of Caldwell's engineering revolution became utterly undeniable. The paddle blade propeller had not merely incrementally improved the P-47's performance. It had instead fundamentally and irrevocably altered the very balance of air power across Europe. German pilots, who had once pursued American fighters with an almost inherent confidence, now found themselves in the unfamiliar and perilous role of the hunted, utterly unable to escape thunderbolts that could ascend faster, operate at higher altitudes, and engage in combat with an effectiveness unmatched by any German aircraft. This transformation was complete and, crucially, irreversible. The aircraft, once derisively mocked as a flying milk bottle, had now ascended to become the veritable terror of European skies, and the ingenious engineer who conceived and designed those 13 feet of revolutionary propeller blades had single-handedly changed the entire course of the air war over Europe. The Luftwaffe would, from that point forward, never again savor the tactical advantages that had, in the war's nascent years, positioned German fighters as the undisputed masters of the European firmament. The culmination of wartime efforts found Frank Caldwell, a pivotal figure at Hamilton Standard, in his office on May 8, 1945, meticulously examining production reports. These documents, starkly presented in numerical form, chronicled the extraordinary success of his engineering innovation. A staggering total of over 12,000 paddle blade propellers had been manufactured across American assembly lines since their initial experimental integration in October 1943. Each individual propeller represented a remarkable feat of precision manufacturing, an unprecedented undertaking that necessitated the comprehensive retooling of entire factories and the extensive retraining of thousands of skilled workers to construct a component that, according to prevailing conventional wisdom, was deemed unfeasible. Providing a poignant human dimension to these impressive production statistics was Colonel Francis Gabreski's concluding mission report from the European theater. His distinguished 56th Fighter Group had executed more than 15,000 combat sorties, flying P-47 Thunderbolts equipped with these revolutionary paddle blades. In these engagements, the group was credited with destroying 438 enemy aircraft while suffering the loss of merely 47 Thunderbolts in air-to-air combat. This resulted in an exceptional exchange ratio exceeding 9.1 in favor of American fighters, a level of aerial supremacy that would have been utterly unattainable without the superior climb rate and elevated altitude capability afforded by Caldwell's groundbreaking propellers. The profound alteration in the P-47's combat efficacy, as evidenced by these statistics, unmistakably underscored the true magnitude of what a mere 13 feet of revolutionary engineering had achieved. Prior to the implementation of the paddle blade modifications, Thunderbolt units typically maintained respectable, though not decisive, exchange ratios of approximately 3.1 against their German fighter counterparts in the attritional warfare of the period. However, following these critical modifications, that ratio dramatically tripled, effectively transforming virtually every aerial engagement into a lopsided victory for American forces, and significantly accelerating the collapse of German air resistance across the European continent. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Major Wilhelm Speck's Final Intelligence Assessment, unearthed from captured Luftwaffe archives after Germany's unconditional surrender, unequivocally confirmed that the Americans had indeed achieved a technological breakthrough of decisive importance with their propeller enhancements. German engineers, despite their earnest endeavors, had attempted to develop comparable improvements for their own fighter aircraft. However, insurmountable obstacles such as severe shortages of critical raw materials and inadequate manufacturing capacity rendered any meaningful progress impossible. Consequently, the paddle blade propeller remained an exclusively American advantage throughout the war's pivotal final year. The immeasurable human benefit derived from this technological superiority was quantifiable in the countless American pilots who returned home safely, thereby avoiding inclusion on the grim casualty lists that had grown alarmingly long during the conflict's initial stages. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, for instance, who secured his inaugural aerial victory with a paddle blade-equipped P-47 over Berlin in March 1944, completed his final combat mission with an impressive tally of 28 confirmed kills, remarkably without suffering a single loss to enemy fighters. His survival, mirrored and multiplied across hundreds of American pilots, represented the most poignant and meaningful measure of Caldwell's engineering triumph. Yet, the paddle blade's profound impact transcended individual pilot survival, fundamentally reshaping the entire strategic balance of the air war. German bomber production had ceased by early 1945, not primarily due to the destruction of their industrial facilities, but rather because the Luftwaffe could no longer provide fighter escorts capable of adequately protecting their bombers from the relentless onslaught of American fighters. The devastating effectiveness of the paddle blade-equipped P-47s rendered German air operations so prohibitively costly that the Reich's aviation industry had, out of sheer desperation, simply abandoned bomber development in favor of futile endeavors to construct defensive fighters. The technological revolution ignited by Caldwell's unconventional, forward-thinking approach served as a catalyst for an entire generation of American aircraft innovations. The iconic North American P-51 Mustang, for example, incorporated similar paddle blade technology into its final advanced variants, as did the Republic P-47N model, which commenced production precisely as the war drew to a close. American aircraft designers gleaned a crucial lesson: that robust, brute force engineering solutions could indeed achieve remarkable success when underpinned by superior manufacturing capability and cutting-edge material science. Frank Caldwell's distinguished personal recognition arrived in the form of a Presidential Medal for Merit, bestowed upon him by President Harry Truman during a solemn, understated ceremony at the White House on June 15, 1945. The accompanying citation lauded his revolutionary propeller design, acknowledging its instrumental contribution to Allied air superiority over Europe. However, Caldwell, with characteristic humility, understood that the true enduring victory belonged to the thousands of courageous American pilots who had flown his propellers into the crucible of combat and against formidable odds, returned safely home. A comprehensive post-war analysis of German aircraft development revealed how completely the paddle blade revolution had irreparably fractured enemy planning. Captured documents unequivocally demonstrated that German designers had abandoned several promising fighter projects in late 1944 because they simply could not match the superior climb performance that American fighters were consistently demonstrating in combat. The psychological impact of facing P-47s that could effortlessly outclimb their German counterparts proved as profoundly demoralizing as the tangible tactical advantages the propellers provided. Moreover, the manufacturing legacy of the paddle blade program extended far beyond the confines of military aviation. American factories had pioneered sophisticated precision casting and machining techniques for propeller production, methodologies that subsequently found pervasive influence and application throughout post-war industry. The metallurgical advances specifically required to meet the paddle blade's stringent strength and weight specifications contributed significantly to improvements in automotive engines, industrial machinery, and eventually the burgeoning field of commercial aviation. Caldwell's wartime innovation, therefore, had precipitated an unprecedented leap in American manufacturing capability, accelerating its progress by many years. The indelible strategic lessons gleaned from the paddle blade's success were certainly not lost on military planners as they began preparing for potential future conflicts. The program had powerfully demonstrated that technological superiority could be achieved not solely through the development of revolutionary new designs, but equally, and perhaps even more effectively, through ingenious optimization and innovative applications of existing technology. American aircraft engines had always possessed formidable power. The paddle blade propellers had simply discovered a way to unleash that power far more effectively than anyone had previously thought possible. By the close of summer, the very production lines that had manufactured paddle blade propellers for wartime endeavors were undergoing a seamless transition, retooling for civilian aircraft applications. The same broad blade technology that had endowed P-47s with their devastatingly effective climb rate was now being adapted for transport aircraft and commercial airliners. Caldwell's pivotal wartime innovation was thus beginning its transformation into an engine of peacetime prosperity, promising to revolutionize civilian aviation just as completely and profoundly as it had dominated the military skies. The undisputed reign over military skies that was once held by the adversary began to falter. The ultimate validation of the paddle blade propeller's extraordinary efficacy emerged not from Allied reports, but from an entirely unexpected and profoundly significant source: the candid debriefings of captured German pilots conducted in the aftermath of the conflict. Veterans of the Luftwaffe, those seasoned airmen who had once commanded the European heavens, consistently pinpointed the sudden proliferation of these uniquely modified American fighter aircraft as the precise moment when their once unassailable air superiority dissolved into an untenable position. Major Klaus Matuschia, a formidable pilot who had miraculously navigated through more than 200 perilous combat sorties, articulated this sentiment with stark clarity, unequivocally describing the paddle blade-equipped P-47s as the aircraft that ended our war in the air, a testament to their devastating impact on the aerial battleground. Frank Caldwell, the visionary engineer behind this innovation, concluded his final wartime engineering report with a degree of modesty that was entirely characteristic of his persona, merely observing that the paddle blade propeller had significantly surpassed its initial design specifications during its extensive operational deployment. Yet beneath this reserved phrasing lay the profound reality of a genuine engineering breakthrough, a revolution that had fundamentally reshaped American air power, elevating it from a posture of defensive necessity to one of overwhelming and decisive dominance. The seemingly outlandish, stupid propeller trick, a concept that many of his contemporaries had once cavalierly dismissed as utterly impractical and even absurd, ultimately proved an irrefutable truth. Occasionally, the most unconventional and daring ideas are precisely those that yield the most transformative and conclusive outcomes. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Even as the guns fell silent and the global conflict drew to a close, Caldwell's pioneering revolution in propeller design was far from finished. Its profound influence would continue to sculpt the trajectory of aviation for many decades into the future. The foundational principles he had so brilliantly demonstrated, the critical insight that sheer efficiency could sometimes be less paramount than sheer effectiveness, the conviction that established conventional wisdom perpetually merited rigorous challenge, and the compelling evidence that truly radical solutions often triumphed spectacularly where cautious, incremental improvements invariably fell short. These tenets would serve as an enduring lodestar, guiding American aerospace development not only through the nascent jet age, but far beyond. Indeed, a mere 13 feet of meticulously engineered paddle-shaped steel had accomplished far more than simply augmenting the performance metrics of a singular fighter aircraft. It had unequivocally showcased the immense transformative power inherent in engineering courage when confronted with seemingly insurmountable challenges.